Hello and welcome everybody to my talk at DevOps Days, Chat Ops when it matters. We're going to get into a little bit about incident collaboration, a little bit about what it means, what DevOps means, what Chat Ops means, what all these things mean, and then of course what they mean to you. So first of all, thank you. A little bit about me. My name is PJ Haggerty. I work at a company called Mattermost, where I'm a developer and community advocate. Mattermost is a communication platform that allows for a bunch of different collaboration techniques to be used in the cloud or behind a firewall with your own servers, wherever you want. Think of it like a lot of the common chat apps that you think of, but the big difference is it's open source. So that means that you can add what features you want, and you can build any that aren't readily available. In my role, I do a bunch of different things to reach out to communities I work with, speaking at events like this one, DevOps Days. We have a podcast called What's Matters. We have a bunch of written content, blogs, things like that. But there's lots of steps that need to be taken before any of that starts off. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the technology behind things. Also, it's really important that I mention that we are currently having our first docathon. So if you love making docs better and making docs a great thing, feel free to join us at any time. Before getting too far into things, I wanted to lay down some terms that we're going to be working with so that we all have the same vocabulary. This is really important, whether you're working in documentation or just generally working with your DevOps team. Everyone using the same language, the same words to mean the same things is super important. So I'd like to always get down first some vocabulary that we'll be using. And of course, we're going to start with DevOps. With Chat Ops. We're going to get to DevOps, but we're going to talk about Chat Ops first. This is a term that was actually coined by the folks at GitHub. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this logo, which is the Hubot or HubBot logo. This is one of the first chat ops tools that people built. And the idea was to kind of manage your systems through a chat interface. At the time, it was Campfire and IRC. It's kind of a way of thinking and working, not necessarily a tool or a framework. Chat ops is more of a concept. It's usually done through bots, but there are a lot of other ways, and we'll get to that. Maybe it was a mistake using Hubot as the example, but you'll see that there's a lot of different things that you can do with chat ops that aren't just using bots. So DevOps, we're at DevOps Days. Do I need to go over the definition? Let's make sure everyone's on the same page before I do. According to the strict definition of DevOps, it's a concatenation of development operations, a method that emphasizes collaboration between the entire spectrum of professionals involved in creation, development, and deployment of software. We all know this definition. This is like the dictionary definition, but it's a bit utopian, right? Like it's a little too perfect world. Today, we think of DevOps as a set of behaviors and tools that allow a team to function. This idea differs from the agile mindset, which focuses on the ability to move a project along a flexible timeline, which can be subject to change depending on feedback and other inputs. As a result, agile is small, fast, and open to change, but it's mostly focused on the software development cycle. Once you get out of that, once you actually have to deliver software, it changes, right? DevOps looks beyond that kind of development piece and encompasses all the steps from concept to delivery of a product. So we know that we're at a DevOps Days. Hopefully, for those of you who are getting started, I hope you got a great definition. For those of you who have been doing that for a while, I hope it was a nice refresher. So let's talk about what is an integration. Integrations are pieces of code that we use to connect different pieces of software together or to communicate states between functions of different applications. So this can come in many forms. The original definition of chat ops was focused on bots, which are integrations that we can use to actually get information from other systems. But integrations can be so much more. Webhooks, APIs, /commands, other features that integrate various application workflows, things that are bringing everything together in the same space, kind of like DevOps, right? You integrate things into what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about incident management. The idea behind incident management is to be ready, right? Not ready for anything, as that can be a ridiculously unrealistic expectation, but ready to respond when the unexpected inevitably happens. DevOps teams often create incident playbooks in order to ensure they are as ready as possible to handle situations as they arise. Incident response is all about preparedness. And this is where the talk really takes off. Looking at the importance of communication when everything goes sideways and when it's least expected, and a little on why least expected is a completely loaded term. So let's talk a little bit about communications in the DevOps world. Specifically, I'm not talking about how you communicate with your significant other or how you communicate with your parents. Let's talk specifically about work communication, DevOps communication. And we'll start with observability. According to Rudolf Kallman, who coined the phrase observability, it's the measure of how well internal states of a system can be inferred from knowledge of its external outputs. Clearly, this definition was developed from an understanding of engineering complex machines where moving parts were internal and their dynamics could only be monitored via extrapolation. So we could only figure out what was going on inside the engine while the engine was closed and running. We couldn't see what was actually going on. We had to kind of gather and figure out what we were doing. Monitoring methods and tools are now so sophisticated and more widely adopted to handle increasingly distributed and complex systems. So this isn't unlike that, but while it's now easier to observe things directly, codes, tests, all that kind of stuff, and extrapolate that behavior to understand why, all bets are off once you hit the real world. That really changes things. Observability is great, especially up to the point of delivering the software. But once it's actually out there and in the world, how are we to know exactly how people are going to use it? This is when we need to be watching the most. So live system observability is about this data-driven iterative process for teams, and it's supposed to improve the overall health and resiliency of systems. Mitigating the issue of live system observability is at the top of the heap for every modern company or organization, whoever is developing an application, be it web, mobile, fintech, funtech, doesn't really matter. Successful tools need to give developers, DevOps practitioners, security operations, systems administrators, and everyone else who happens to work at a company that's building software, hint, every company is building software. It's to give these people insight into how these systems are functioning in real time out in the world. And they must be built to scale linearly and efficiently store data so users are not wasting their compute resources. Now, this is important. Note that I mentioned on this slide that we're talking about information. I'm not talking about data. Collecting data is raw. Data is just a thing. It's a set of numbers. It's a count of things. We're talking about information. Information is something you've processed, is data you've processed that you can then act upon and get better information from. So information is extracted from data. Don't confuse the two. That's important. So the importance of tightly coupled integrations can't really be stressed enough. This is all part of the communication framework. We, as humans, appreciate a good integration. I like a fine integration on a Saturday night. We prefer when things work together socially. That is the easiest for us. This is why a lot of people say, oh, you work in tech, it's so casual. It's seemingly casual because it's easier for us to interact and communicate when things are social. Why would it be any different when we communicate the way we communicate with the teams that we work with? The most interesting part of the tool set here is that it's used to implement the DevOps philosophy of communicating. DevOps is about working better together on all teams. Communication and your methods of communication are the key important element to integrating all parts of your team. The tools here, we all know what they are. HipChat, IRC, and of course Mattermost, we're part of that team. These are the tools that bring you the successful DevOps implementation. The integration of people is the easiest way to bring together good communication that allows you to act when an incident occurs. Then of course there's chaos. And this is a concept that still kind of bends a few brains every once in a while. It jars. Are we really going to ditch half of our production servers at peak times? Are we totally going to drop a database randomly? Are we going to put up with a little Bobby Tables? For those of you who get the reference, it's kind of an older one. Not everyone is as comfortable with doing this as much as others, but the benefits are clear. Making our systems more resilient in the eyes of our users is a key to our success. We need to make sure things work together. In order to make sure they work together, we have to mitigate as many problems as we can before they go out into the real world. Doing that takes a lot of different minds. When we talk about testing and DevOps and we look at things, especially when we're dealing with things like AI or facial recognition software or things like that, the more and more developing technology that's out there, the more we need to make sure that we have different ideas behind what we're doing. DevOps culture really lends itself to that. Chaos theory really lends itself to that, not chaos theory, the mathematical idea, but chaos engineering, the idea that we apply to DevOps. So make sure things are working, make sure things are going together, because you want to ensure that everything works and functions before it hits the real world as much as you possibly can. So putting everything together, it makes it much easier to stay focused on resolving an issue. This is all about resolving issues, right? This is about playbooks and incident management. This is what this talk is about. So now we have the basic ideas. We have a recipe. Now we actually have to put it together. We have our ingredients. Integrations create automated feeds to bring information from systems across your workflow together, not data, information. And a central chat platform like Mattermost keeps everyone on the team on the same page. Creating playbooks based on what you've learned from the chaos engineering experiments allows you to be prepared for the worst. Keeping a decent observability stack together with a great communication setup makes ChatOps work for your team, and it makes your organization successful. Whether it's the ad hoc response team for an incident, or there's a dedicated SRE team using DevOps Command Center, having it all in one place is the key to successfully ensuring the stability of what your organization is working to deliver, even through a crisis. And that's what incident management is about. It's about crisis, managing crisis, mitigating crisis. So when it comes to ChatOps and crisis, here's a few ideas. Here's some best practices. Start small. When it comes to integrating ChatOps with your DevOps workflow, you need to start small. It's absolutely necessary. What's the one thing DevOps people love above all else, besides DevOps days? We all love DevOps days. What's the other thing? Automation. We love automation. So start small. Automate one task. A simple task, preferably. Something not critical to the whole system. It's going to take some time to learn what's working and what isn't. So you want to ensure you're building bots and integrations that function before you jump into building something your team and company are 100% dependent upon. You can't go from 0 to 1,000,000. You need to take your time, and you need to make sure that everything works and is functioning. You need to make sure, especially if you're not a coder, that everything works the way you expect it to. If you are a pure DevOps engineer, and it's so rare to find someone who gives himself that title, but you've been focused on the functioning of backend systems for like quite a while.